Here's a new cylinder head we picked up. Picked up a used exhaust manifold as well. Got everything switched over from the old cylinder head. So the EGR valve is all bolted on, new gasket. Thermostat housings bolted on, new gasket. The exhaust manifold actually came with the head, so I didn't pull that off, so we're going to leave that as is. Got everything cleaned up and laid out as far as the cam retainers and lifters. Picked up a complete head gasket set, so that should cover all the gaskets we need to complete the job. The new head gasket, as you can see, it's multiple layers, and it tells you here on the gasket that it's a new improved style and whatnot. However, I guess we'll give it a shot. We're not going to use any additional adhesives or anything. We're going to put this gasket on just the way they say. That's a special coating, this blue coating, and if you read it here, it tells you all that. You just want to take and blow out all the head bolt holes, because you don't want any antifreeze oil down inside. Got everything cleaned up. See how some oil came out of that one? Okay, the main reason you want to make sure the bolt holes are all cleaned out is because you don't want to cause what they call hydro lock. When you put the head bolts in, you go to torque them down and there's liquid down inside there. It compresses and it hydro locks, and it'll actually crack the block in some cases. So we want to avoid that. The block surface is all cleaned. I used a finer wire wheel, not too coarse. Scraped it first, then went over with the wire wheel. Same thing with the head. I think we're ready to go. I put some oil in the cylinders, wiped it down. I think we're ready for the head gasket. As you can see on the block, this is the only port on this gasket with this style. So it must go this way. Since we got a used head, the block has dowel pins in it, so we just want to confirm that the head doesn't have the dowel pins in it, because sometimes these can stay stuck in the head or they stay in the block. And as you can see here, where the two dowel pins are going to go, they look clean. Okay, prior to setting the cylinder head on, I'm going to make sure the number one cylinder is on top dead center, which is confirmed by this timing mark on the crank, lined up to the boss on the block. And another little trick here is, if you have the old head bolts, say you're replacing all the head bolts, take and cut the heads off of two of the old ones and cut like a slot where you can put a regular screwdriver, and just put them in caddy corner, or you can do it with all four corners, and it gives you a guide for the head. However, we're not going to do that on this one. We're just going to rely on the dowel pins to guide us, and let's see what happens. It's really not that heavy. It's awkward. Now I'm going to have to try to put the exhaust manifold down in there first. Having a second hand always helps. So, you ready?
Yep.
Now we don't want to let it fall in the head gasket, whatever we do. So make sure you have a good grip on that head. Okay, we're on. Okay, I got all the head bolts in and ran down, snug by hand. Now we're going to take and torque the cylinder head. Over here, I'm not sure if you can read this screen good, but our first pass is going to be 25 foot-pounds. Then the second pass is 50. Then the third pass, we're going to repeat step 2, go over everything 50 foot-pounds. Then on the fourth step, it says do not use the torque wrench for this step. However, you can use the torque wrench, just don't use it set to anything. So just put it up to like, I don't know, 100 or a little bit more, and then go an additional quarter turn. So the sequence I'm going to use is by the book. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, whenever you're torquing something, you want to avoid at all possible using an extension. However, with the way these are recessed in, it's kind of hard to get away from it. If you have a deeper 15mm socket, you might be able to just pull it off. However, I'm going to use an extension. It's pretty heavy walled, and especially for the first couple passes, it's not going to matter too much. But there is a calculation for every inch. There's a formula out there how much you have to add to the torque for your extension. Alright, so we're going to start here. Got the torque wrench set to 25 foot-pounds. Just going to run these a little bit snugger than what I got them. So that's 25, as you heard from the click. That's 1. That's 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 10. Okay, now we're going to jack the torque wrench up to 50. We're going to do that in the same sequence. 1. 10. Okay, now for this next step, they want you to go a quarter turn past your last torque. And the instructions, it tells you not to use a torque wrench. However, if you're going to use a torque wrench for extra leverage, take and jack it up beyond where you're going to be going. So if you just say jack it up to 100 or so. Now we can simply eyeball it and take it from here, pull it straight in line, which would be 1/4. Or we could use our degree finder and be a little more accurate with our torque. Now, to be honest with you, normally I would just do this by eye just to get it out. But for the video, for demonstration purposes, I'll show you a better method of doing it, and I'll get my degree finder. Okay, now the way this thing works, as you see, the base is independent of the socket. So we put this here, and we loosen this up, and we just turn our dial to 0. When we turn the socket portion and we hit 90 degrees, we know we want a quarter turn. You want to try to do it in one motion. Two. 10. Okay. As you see, you didn't hear my torque wrench go off at all. It's because I had it way beyond. I'm going to just lower this down to like 70. Just to make sure I got all the bolts. The rest of the installation is going to be pretty much reverse of the way we took it apart. So to save you guys some time, I'm going to save myself some time editing and whatnot. I took and I reinstalled the bracket for the heater hose lines. Got the heater hose hooked back up to the thermostat housing with the clamp in place. Got the 2 retaining bolts in and tight. Got the 2 heater hoses. They line right up, fall in place. Got them reclamped. There's 2 vacuum hoses that go to the EGR. See back here, they fall right in place. They're a certain length where they'll fall right in. So that's pretty self-explanatory when you go to hook them up. Now I'm going to take and put this back bracket in. Okay, I led you a little wrong on that last step. Prior to installing the upper heater hose, you got to install the retaining bolt for the bracket on this side of the cylinder head. Then you got 1 retaining bolt in the back. When I laid everything out, I kept all the bolts with the bracket. So you're going to want to use the right length bolts. So keep your bolts in order because you don't want to damage the cylinder head by going too deep or using the wrong bolt. So now that that's in place and the bolt's tight, now I can install the heater hose. Okay, with the bracket in place, you can simply just take the EGR solenoid and everything and clip it into the bracket. And all the wire looms clip nice and neatly in. And this is for the cam sensor. That's not going to be hooked up until later, once we get the cams installed. Okay, I got all the lifters reinstalled. Now we're ready for the rocker arms. It's got roller rockers. This motor's pretty fancy. Got high top pistons, rocker arms. Oh, forgot a lifter there. That would have been bad. Want to see if there's a lifter on that table there? I'm short 1 lifter, so it must be on that rag. Yep, there it is. You'd have fun putting that rocker on there without a lifter, so. I just want to make sure everything's clean too prior to installing this. Okay, so make sure you got all your rockers, all your lifters in place. You're ready to install the cams. I like to pre-lube everything prior to assembling, so I just got some oil and I just pretty much squirt the firewall. Okay, I like to pre-lube everything. Okay, take 2.
He likes to pre-lube everything.
Yeah. So I just took an oil gun with some oil in it and just shot it over all the rockers. Put some in each journal, each cam journal. I'll take them, we'll smear it around a little bit. Make sure your hands are clean. Alright, we're ready. Okay, prior to installing the cams, if you take notice on the cam sprockets with the time marks lined up just like I got them here, the pin in the cam is facing down. Okay, so if you come over here to the cams, you see they have a pin. Now your intake cam has your cam sensor on it, so it has this magnetic pickup on it. So we know that's your intake cam, and we know this is your exhaust cam. So you're going to want to face this pin down when installing. Okay, I'm going to start with the exhaust cam. I got the new oil seal on it. Just put a little bit of oil around that as well on the cam, and then I slid it on. Only because it's going to be easier with this plastic cover in our way to do it now. So make sure you got that pin down, because if you don't have that in the right spot and you go and compressing it, you know, your number 1 cylinder, your number 4 cylinder pointing up. If these loads are down, it's going to put the valves right into your piston, so you don't want that to happen. So if you notice, with the pin facing down, the lobes are up. So make sure all your rockers are square. With the cam lobes. Make sure the oil seal is always seated against the head. We should be ready for the retainers. We're just going to put these caps on in this area here, because remember this front cap does both cams. So I'm not going to go tighten anything down, I'm just going to set everything in place. I put a little oil on the caps already. This front one is number 1 cap, remember, so we're going to go, and the back is R. If you look, it's right on the head. You have the L and the R. So this would be R2, R3, there's arrows on the caps. You want to face it in the same direction as these arrows here towards the timing belt. Okay, I repeated the same process on the intake cam. I just had these snugged down with my finger and didn't compress the cam yet. Now we're going to put in the front retainer. The only thing different about this retainer is that you got to use a Mopar sealant or something equivalent and just put a real thin film on it. Okay, make sure your seals are where you want them. Got my fingers. Seals are in. Make sure to push all the way back. Okay, I apologize, but the camera ran out of space, so I had to transfer everything over to the laptop. However, a major step that I did miss before I realized we were out of space and I didn't want the sealant to set up is that I took and I ran down everything evenly, snug, just with a socket and ratchet. And when you pull these down, there's some springs that are compressed, so you don't want to go and just tighten on the center or just one side uneven, because then you're loading that cam in a way that you shouldn't be loading it, and you could actually snap these cams if you get too far out of whack. So to prevent any damage, just tighten everything down evenly. Once you feel pressure being pulled on one retaining cap, just move to the next and work your way across it until everything's compressed nice and even across. Same thing with the intake cam. Now we're ready to grab a torque wrench and torque everything down to spec. As you notice, the only ones we'll be torquing right now are the smaller, the 8mm head bolts. Okay? Now that's the socket size, that ain't the size of the bolt. So keep it simple. This is the one that takes the 8mm socket. We're going to torque all them first, as shown here, and they're going to go to 106 inch-pounds. So you're going to need an inch-pound torque wrench for this process. So let's do it to it. Okay, I got the torque wrench set to 106 inch-pounds. Now we're going to take and torque the small cam retainers according to the sequence. I'm going to start right here. Now that I torqued them once, I'm going to go over them one more time. And proceed to the intake cam. Come one more time. Alright, now for the bigger bolts on this front retaining cap and the rear retaining cap, we're going to go to 215 inch-pounds. Now by the book they tell you to do this prior to installing the seals. It's just a preferred method. You can do it as you want, but They can torque this one down to 106 inch-pounds, which we're good. Okay, stepped ahead a little bit. I took and I installed the rear timing belt cover retaining bolts that go to the cylinder head right below the cams. They're in, they're tight. I also installed the timing belt idler, and that's tight. Now I'm going to install the cam sprockets. What was the torque? Do you remember?
75.
Alright, now for torquing the cam sprockets, they get torqued to 75 foot-pounds, so it's pretty much. So you got to find a way to hold the cams from turning. So as you see here, this is actually made for torquing and setting the preload on your rear. But however, I made up some bolts, as you see, my makeshift spacers and whatnot. However, it's just something to hold this sprocket in place. Now we're going to torque it to spec. Of course, my wrench. Okay. The exhaust is done already. Here's my makeshift holder. You get an idea of what you got to do. Okay, so once I torqued down the cam sprockets, I took and I installed the timing belt. And how I did that is I put it around the crank first. I had my assistant help hold it over top of the cam sprockets while holding the cams in time. This one wanted to spring back, so she just had to put a little bit of pressure on the cam to keep it inside the belt, inside the cogs, and the time marks lined up perfect, and the cranks lined up as well. So once we got all that around and into the cogs in the top, then I went down below and took a 6mm Allen wrench, put it in the tensioner. Now you could use an 1/8 inch Allen wrench. When you pull the tensioner all the way into the loosened position, there's a stopper in there, like a pin. You can use the Allen wrench as a pin that'll hold it in the fully released position. However, I failed to do that when I was removing it, but you could do it this way as well. Just take your 6mm Allen wrench, put it in there, pull down on the tensioner, and then push it over top of the tensioner. It's easier said than done, but it will go on. As you see, the 2 time marks lined up here. And then you come down below and you can see the mark on the block, and then the mark on the crank sprocket lined up perfect. Okay, so that's our time marks and our belt installed. It's a self spring loaded tensioner. I would recommend changing it while you have it apart. That's just your preference. Okay, this part sucks, but what you got to do, you got to jack the motor up as high as you can get it. While you're jacking it up, or having someone jack it up for you, just shake the motor while you're going. If you feel binding, stop, check to see what you're hitting, but get it up as high as you can get it. Then you got to get this monstrosity of a bracket. That's a major pain in the you know what, but it goes in there. You just got to finagle it. I found that if I put it down under to the back side of the power steering pump, then just work my way underneath the timing belt on both sides and get it in. Get your 2 top retaining bolts in. Okay, then I lowered it down pretty much as far as I could to get this one retaining bolt in. I got that in and tight, so now's a good time to put this lower cover on. Okay, the lower cover's in place. Got 3 retaining bolts. 1, 2, 3. They're all tight. Next I'm gonna have my assistant jack it up until the motor mount lines up. Alright, jack it up a little bit. Oop, hold up right there. Let's give that a shot. I'm gonna take and tighten that up. Okay, run the harmonic balancer in all the way, and then torque it to 105 foot-pounds using the same technique as we did on the cams. Okay, hold the crank from spinning. Okay, we're torqued. Okay, I just came up here, slid the upper timing cover on, installed the 2 retaining bolts, one here and one here. tighten it down. I forgot to mention one thing. Prior to installing the covers, I took and turned the motor over two complete revolutions by the crank. After I torqued the harmonic balancer down, I put a socket and ratchet on there by hand and slowly cranked the engine over 2 revolutions to make sure nothing was interfering. Everything feels good. And then I proceeded on to putting the covers on. Okay, next I came up here and reinstalled the power steering rear retainer bracket. It's got one retaining bolt here, one retaining bolt right down there. Tighten them up, 15mm socket. I installed the power steering mounting bolts, the retaining bolts, 1, 2, 3. Put them in, tighten them up. Came down here, reinstalled the lower dog bone. And next I just came down and started putting the accessory belts on it. Just want to give you a shot of the belt routing. If you look right back there on the alternator, you'll see the adjustment bolt. Prior to tightening the retaining bolts, run the adjuster bolt down until the belt's tight. Alright, next I took and installed the motor mount bracket to the strut tower with the one retaining bolt there, one retaining bolt there, 18mm. Those were the ones that fought me coming out real bad, so I cleaned up the bolt and put a little oil on them first. And they still fought me, but I'm sure it helped a little. And then I put the top dog bone in, got this retaining bolt tight, those 2 tight. Now you want to try to get this center, because that is notched out a little bit, so try to get it to where it looks like it was before. Alright, next I took and I installed the cruise control to its retaining bracket, 2 10mm head bolts. Reinstalled the AC lines, tighten them up. Okay, we got the valve cover all cleaned up, new gaskets installed. Let's put it on. I'm not sure how this is going to show up with the glare. However, you got to tighten it in 3 steps. First step, 40 inch-pounds, then 80 inch-pounds, and then 105 inch-pounds. If you come over here, here's a shot of the torque sequence. This is the order you're going to torque them in. Next, I took and installed the 2 retaining bolts for the power steering reservoir. The 13mm heads, tighten them down. Next, we're going to take and install the lower intake manifold. Got it all cleaned up, new gaskets installed. Get these all started. Alright, here's a shot of the lower intake manifold, 105 inch-pounds. Here's your torque sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Good luck trying to follow that with a torque wrench because they're tight to get to. However, if you got a feel for the other 105 inch-pounds, you know right about where to get it. Okay, I took and I hooked up the fuel injector harness. You know, down below it's just a single plug. And you come up, plug in each injector. On that injector is your temperature sensor that goes to your thermostat housing. Next we'll take and install the thermostat, fill neck, and upper hose. In addition, I reinstalled the coil pack. You just got your 4 returning bolts. You want to tighten them up nice and snug and then plug it in. Okay, you get the new thermostat gasket and the housing. Just install the retaining bolts and tighten them down. Okay, we got the filler neck reinstalled. Torque the retaining bolts to 20 foot-pounds. Got the overflow hose hooked up. As you can see the way around it, goes down, under, up and around. Over here, I got the upper radiator hose hooked back up. Retaining clamp in place. Next we're going to reinstall the cam sensor. I got the new seal on. Run them down. Okay, the fuel lines clip back in place. The exhaust is hooked back up to the manifold. Oil pack's on. Spark plug wires are in. I left the same plugs in it that came with the cylinder head. We'll see how it runs like that for now. And if everything's good, I'll give it a complete tune-up. Alright, the cam sensor's in, plugged in. We're ready for the upper intake. Let's put it on. Okay, if I seem rushed, I apologize. It's just that it's almost midnight and I want to get this thing done so I can get home. So I'm getting ready to install the upper intake. Forgot to mention I also plugged in the O2 sensor, so that's all plugged in. Everything here looks good. I got the battery charger on. The battery's not hooked up yet, but I just got to start charging this battery because it's a little low from sitting. I had the trunk open and didn't realize the interior light was on overnight. Okay, so here's the upper intake, all new gaskets. I think we're ready. Throw these retaining bolts in. Okay, let me just go over a few things I did. Upper intake's on. I'll give you a shot at the torque sequence in a moment here. Everything's torqued to specs. Throttle cable, cruise control cables hooked up. Got all the sensors hooked back up. Air cleaner box back in. So you got your idle air, your TPS plugged in. There's a hose that goes down in the back for that goes to the bottom of this air cleaner tube. A couple vacuum lines right on the back side of the intake here. So we got that all hooked up. The EGR tubes hooked back up, bolted in place. Right back there. Got two retaining bolts. They're all tight. The dipstick tube retaining bolt, that's in place. There's one retaining bolt down here. Hey, look at that. So that's why I love going over this with you guys. See, I forgot to tighten the bolt. There's a retaining bolt right here to help support this upper intake. I'm going to take and tighten that up real quick. Okay, that's all plugged in. Everything looks good. I just started putting antifreeze in it. I don't see nothing coming out the bottom yet. Oh, I reinstalled it and tightened the drain plug on the radiator. So we're all good there. And we have some antifreeze in it. So I'm just going to take and tighten that retaining bolt up and we're going to try to start it and see what happens. Okay, I also forgot to mention I reinstalled the relay for the fuel pump. Remember we had that disconnected. So that's plugged back in. Covers back on the fuse panel. Can't see anything I may have missed here. Our hoses are hooked up. I'm just going to have you cycle the key. Don't crank it, just turn the key on. Turn the key off. Turn the key on. Oh yeah, we also took the glove off the exhaust. Alright, here we go. Crank it. It's gonna take a little while. Turn the key off. Turn the key on. That was there previously, so you know that's something I'm gonna have to take care of in the near future, but it's running pretty smooth. I'll let it sit here and idle for a little bit. runs, the smoother it gets. It's been running now for over 5 minutes. The smoke you're seeing is all the oil greasing my hands as I was working. Popping it off and pulling down. I'm letting it run a little bit with the cap off it. The cooling fan just kicked on. We're doing the temperature. Dark back here, but I just want to give you a shot. It looks good back here. It's just regular condensation. I'll show you where that exhaust leak's at real quick. Right where that clamp's at. It's not rusted or anything, it's just that clamp, the retaining bolts broke on it. So I'll fix that later on. Okay, it's been running for a good 15-20 minutes. Everything's nice and smooth. You see, everything sounds good. There's no whining. No missing. Everything's nice and smooth. All the oil's gonna have to burn off. However, I don't see any leaks. Everything looks good. I'm gonna lower off the jack stand, take it for a ride, and I'll give you guys an update. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning, but she's running great, guys. See, temperature is running right on average.